Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is the Austrian, and first and foremost, I'd like to apologize for my long absence from this channel. I've been doing a job over the summer because I need to earn a little money for myself, but thankfully, I've had a couple free moments, and in that time, I've been thinking about a question, and it's a question I'd like to ask you. And that is, what if government were a person? Now, I know there's a lot of objections to personifying government. Obviously, government is so much bigger than just one individual. But really, if you wouldn't let an individual or even a group of individuals that you just happen to be acquainted with get away with something, why would you let any other group of people get away with it? So play along with me if you would here, and let's personify government. In fact, let's make it a pretty personal relationship. Let's make government your neighbor. And so, how would government act as your neighbor? How would he be? Well, let's start with how government would treat you personally, as an individual. So, once a year, your neighbor government would walk over to your house and demand that you give him a certain portion of your income. But he doesn't just do this to you, he does this to all your other neighbors as well. He comes over to all their houses with his weapons and his group of enforcers to extort money from them and you. When you refuse to surrender a portion of your income, he tells you you're being unreasonable because everybody else already voluntarily handed over theirs. By voluntarily, of course, he means that when he stuck a gun in their faces, they chose not to risk their lives. You try to explain to government what coercion is and why it's wrong, but he doesn't really care, and he continues to threaten you if you don't hand over that certain portion of your income. When you still refuse, you're locked in his basement for not paying your fair share, and he continues to threaten your life until you hand over the money. Not wanting to sacrifice your life for a little bit of your income, you choose to surrender the money and go back to living your life as normal. Now, what does government do with your money which he extorted from you? Well, one of the first things that he does is hire security for you and all the other neighbors he took money from. You didn't ask for the security, but you do appreciate it because you understand it's necessary. However, you wonder why he didn't come to ask you for this money voluntarily, because if you knew this is what he was going to use it for, you would have been more inclined to cooperate with him. He doesn't stop there, though. He then goes on to use your money to pay for the health care of some of the sick in your neighborhood. Again, you don't see anything wrong with this, as you would have happily handed over the money to those truly sick neighbors of yours, but some of your neighbors are just lazy slobs who refuse to take care of themselves. You don't know why your money should be used to pay for their health when they refuse to take care of themselves in the first place. Why should your money be forcefully taken from you to pay for those who aren't even willing to pay for themselves? One last thing government does with your money is build houses for all the stray cats of the neighborhood and pays for their food and water. This upsets you greatly because you hate stray cats. In fact, you're allergic to cats in general. You would have never spent any amount of money on this project. Not only does it harm you personally, but those stray cats are bringing all manner of disease to your other neighbors as well, and none of them would have wanted this either. When you ask government why he chose to spend your money this way, he claims it is in the common interest that these cats be housed. When you ask him whose common interest this is for, as most of the people in the neighborhood are against it, he cites some study he himself conducted, claiming that the cat houses were necessary. Of course, you point out that this study is very clearly biased to promote his opinion, but he disregards your words as he already has your money and doesn't need to worry about your opinion. Seeing all the useless crap that he's purchased makes you a little upset, and so you go to your fellow neighbors in order to try to rectify the situation with them. Some of your neighbors tell you that because you're complaining about the services that you don't like the cat houses and the medical care for those greasy slobs, you're ungrateful for the services you do like, the security, and that this is the price we pay for a civilized society. Apparently, complaining about services you never asked for in the first place, even though you do appreciate them, makes you a hypocrite. Apparently. When you ask your neighbors about why he couldn't have just come to you and asked for the money voluntarily so he would only have to pay for the services he wanted, they mutter incoherently about some common good too. Of course, when you ask them why you should be forced to pay for some lazy idiot's healthcare, or how the mass importation of diseased feral cats is in anyone's common interest, you don't have much of a response except they cite that same study that government conducted. You point out how horribly everyone is being affected by government, but they just say something to the effect of, "That's the way it works here, kid, and if you don't like it, I can go move to Somalia." How funny. Now, clearly, government is being too kind to those it's supposedly helping. But what about those who become its enemy? Government has decided that your neighborhood is now going to war with the other neighborhood a couple of towns over. And this isn't the first time that this has happened. Now, in the past, government told us to go to war with the town that was ethnically cleansing other towns. And you happily volunteered to go to war against that town as you knew they were violating the rights of others. You would fight for the rights of others just as vigorously as you would fight for your own rights. You agreed with the government that the previous war had been a just one and overall worth it. But this new war wasn't the same as that old war. This new war isn't declaring war on that town because that town has done something wrong. Instead, there are these insurgents within the town that government wants to get rid of. When asked why insurgents in another town are a threat to ours, government mutters on about some neighborhood security risk. Now, if these insurgents truly are a threat to neighborhood security, you'd want to fight them. And so you decide government has a point and you go to fight the insurgents in the other town over. When you get there, however, you find many of the insurgents are indistinguishable from the town's folk themselves. This makes it incredibly hard to determine who is truly the enemy. As a result, civilian casualties grow higher, and that only seems to make the native townsfolk who you're supposedly helping more angry. Even though you're supposed to be helping them by getting rid of the insurgents in their town, they don't seem very appreciative. In fact, it seems like your presence there is actually prompting some of the native townsfolk to help the insurgents. While you're there, you also learn that these insurgents are only the remnants of a paramilitary group we supported in the last war, who have now turned against us. While you know there are definitely some dangerous insurgents out there who want to hurt your town, you realize that your actions in the neighboring town have only made the situation far worse. There are definitely much better ways of solving this problem than what government is having you do. However, when you go to government and tell him that you've turned against the war effort in search of more effective alternatives, he again throws you in his basement, this time for subverting the war effort and being a traitor to the neighborhood. After all of this, it turns out even though government has an essentially infinite supply of money from the income of everyone else in the neighborhood, government still isn't able to pay off all his useless crap and wasteful wars. So now what he has to do is issue IOUs. To do this, he takes the money it gets from you and everyone else and copies it on a massive scale. This isn't money created through work or through some kind of labor or value. This is money pulled from thin air. Now, however, there's a bunch of money floating around in the market that looks exactly like yours, and because of this massive increase in supply, the value of the money you earned actually decreases. So not only is government taking money right out of your pocket, it's simultaneously making the money you keep worth even less. It becomes harder and harder to afford basic necessities and keep up with the amount of money government demands from you every year. You can try to question government's mass reproduction of money, but again, government cites another study conducted by himself that concludes this devaluation of money is necessary for the oh-so-nebulous common interest. When you try to create your own money that won't get devalued by government and share it with the neighbors, well, you can imagine where government throws you again. Now, after all of this, you might be thinking that government is a pretty shitty individual. He steals from you, spends your money on almost entirely useless crap, sends you off to wars that don't help, and makes all the money you earn completely worthless. But don't worry, folks, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and that light is the fact that government is a neighbor you can vote to replace, or at least you get to vote for the people who boss government around, so to speak. And this gives you all the power. Now, what does this power get you exactly? Well, friendo, it gets you the world. You want government to stop stealing all your money and spending it on crap you don't approve of or think is necessary? Don't worry about that, because that will continue to happen. But now you can vote people in who say they'll take a little bit less of your money. They say that, but they might not always do that. Not satisfied? It's alright, because now you're the one who decides what useless crap they spend your money on. Don't want to spend your money on healthcare for that fat slob down the road? Not a problem. Instead, we can take that money and use it to build a bridge into that town to the north, which is literally just one family in a trailer in the middle of arid land. It's not like that takes you anywhere important, but as long as they're taking your money, they might as well spend it on something, right? I mean, obviously no one liked those cat houses, but these dog houses are so much better. How? Well, here, I just got government to conduct another study proving why dogs are even better. What do you mean you don't believe me? Well, not happy with the war you're fighting right now? That's okay. Now that you can vote for who's in charge of government, you decide what war we're going to fight. Don't think we should be fighting that war with the people 3 towns to the east who have those funny hats? That's okay. Instead, we could go to war with that town 5 towns to the north. You know, the ones with the vodka. They totally deserve it. Still a bit annoyed about your money being devalued? Yeah, well, there's nothing anybody can do about that. So, what do you think of your government? What? What do you mean this is still essentially the same thing? What do you mean you don't want any of your money taken from you without your consent? You some kind of freeloader? What do you mean that new housing was useless? You just want dogs to die in the street or something? You some kind of cold-hearted freak? Of course those guys needed to be invaded. Every patriot agrees. You are a patriot, aren't you? Oh, that money devaluation thing? Yeah, don't worry about that. Yeah, we really needed all that money we pulled from thin air to fund all that other stuff you don't agree with. Don't like it? Well, you can just get out then. That's the price you pay for a civilized society, bud. But hey, don't worry, pal. If you really want to change the system, you can just vote for all the same things to continue happening, but under a different face. Isn't it great that our neighbor gives us such freedom?